The interior space, you're gonna wonder about price. We'll hit you with that later. Take a look at this interior and exterior. This is for the industry executive that runs funeral homes. And don't worry, if you are not into that and you don't want to store coffins, this is for a guy like Jack who thinks he's J.R. Bullion. He's always carrying around his gold bars and his bullion threatening litigation. He couldn't fit it in some of the sports cars, but in this, it's no problem. Let's talk about the big pros. Cargo capacity. It's got about as much cargo capacity with the seats down and up as an SUV like the Audi Q8. Yes, it's that practical. The back seats are tremendous. Good adjustability, they don't feel like concrete. The front seats have some of the best seat massagers in the industry if you opt for it. The interior space is in line with the rest of the Mercedes lineup. You get blinded by carbon fiber if you opt for that. The stitching is high quality, the leathers are good. Everything feels like it was built to a price point for someone that is John Business Plus. The dash has great leather stitching, the audio system, the Burmeister tests well, and the physical controls, what's left of them, is pretty easy to use. Now, the negatives. Everything has gone to touch controls. You gotta swipe on the steering wheel to control certain things. You have these two-threaded screens, and while they look great statically, when you start to use the damn mouse pad to get around, you're constantly in the wrong spot. You're like, where the hell is this? Why am I doing this? And I don't have time for this. I got a 5 o'clock business meeting. Well, if you just ignore that and you think about what you're really getting here, then you're going to be blown away. And that's why we're heading into the shop to talk about the technical attributes before we drive this.
Mark, we're underneath the recently refreshed E63 AMG S Wagon. And as you know, I feel a certain way about wagons. They tickle my fancy.
I don't know what it is with everybody, like the journalist Dungeons and Dragons bros, that seem to make everybody think this is the best car ever made. And I'm going to joke around about this quite a bit during the video, but I just want to put this out there. We had to shoot this on track because it was so fast, and I didn't want to risk doing it on the street. And I had an opportunity to turn about 6 laps that I would turn like in my own car. And this thing, this boat, defies all logic.
So let me walk.
That doesn't mean I like it, by the way. But it is incredible. So tell me about how they did it.
So quickly, here's what they refreshed, because this is largely just a carryover. This is a mid-cycle refresh. The front end of this car and rear end, the fascias have been changed, and they've reduced front end lift, which would be hilarious normally in a car like this, but this thing is capable of probably delimited almost 200 miles an hour. It's like 186 with a limiter. They've also changed the interior infotainment, which is a bad thing, as you talked about in the interior segment, but most of this is a carryover. So what you have is a all-wheel drive wagon that is rear-wheel drive biased with about 600 horsepower and 617 foot-pounds of torque. We're going to talk about the engine shortly. This is a true rear-drive wagon. Unlike the RS6 that only is all-wheel drive, this is truly rear biased. And honestly, the all-wheel drive system, to me, feels similar to how the GTR works. So when you're going flat out and you get the car to step out when you have the all-wheel drive system activated, not when you're in drift mode, the rear end will start to rotate like a rear drive car, and then the front end will pull you out of the corner to straighten out the vehicle, which is pretty impressive.
The front end, you can't get away from the weight. No. I will say that the only thing they can't completely eliminate is the fact of you have all this mass getting jammed into the front wheels. And even though it's a hybrid, double wishbone, multi-link, and they do an amazing job with it, you have to be careful with the front end. It does want to wash itself out and then go into oversteer, but we're talking about this is like nitpicking something. I mean, it really is incredible how well it has grip.
And when you put this thing into drift mode, as you're gonna see during our drive segment, this thing is unbelievable.
So it does both.
Yes.
I think that's the funny part to me, because we look at all these high-end, ultra expensive, like luxury barges, and there's all these gimmicks and bullshit they keep throwing at them to make them faster, better on paper. And then you realize what they're doing here is they're giving you both. You can have fun, like throw the back end around, and you can have grip at the same time. So it does both, and it does both pretty much as best as I've ever seen.
You could probably run down someone in a real sports car
Yes.
at a track day if they were just moderately talented. That's how fast this
Yes,
vehicle is.
absolutely.
So the front suspension, you have a all aluminum front subframe. You have all aluminum control arms, and you have air ride front and rear in this car. And you have truly massive rear air springs in this vehicle. Your rear subframe, though, is steel. However, that is pretty similar to what you'll see on the RS6, which, if I remember correctly, is also steel rear subframed.
It's steel, however, corrosion coated with a protectant, and all the steel in the back is that way. So unlike a lot of the more affordable cars, you're not going to have a problem with the whole back end rusting out, so it's less of an issue. Most of this car is completely covered up. There is a ton of cooling. When I say cooling, there's trans, oil cooler, intercoolers, and there is about 6,000 feet of lines for coolant that are running everywhere that I'm sure you're never going to have to service. You have the golf ball panel here that smooths out airflow and directs it to the differential. There is so much overwork in engineering. This is a real AMG product, front to back.
Yes.
From braking to cooling to aero to everything. This is a complete package, Jack.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about two things before we get into the engine. The brakes. You have two different options. You have steel rotors or these carbon ceramics. And I will say, at least on the track, they are remarkable.
Well, yeah, if for the less than 3 people on the planet that is actually going to take this to a track, you can, and they will hold up, and then you're going to pay up the ass to replace them when you destroy them.
And then you also have your differential. Your rear differential is an electronic limited slip in the back, and unlike the M5, when you put this in drift mode, it feels a lot more natural. When you drive the M5 around, it has a really synthetic locking feel in the back. This car doesn't have that. I mean, obviously, it's purposely locking the rear end, but it feels far more normal when you're trying to get this thing to slide around. The 5 people in the world that are really going to try to drift this. This is also probably the firmest out of the 3 ride-wise of the M5 RS6, correct? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, it's definitely firm.
It's not punishing.
It's not punishing. Part of that is the way the dampers are set up. Like the front, you have a wide range of adjustability, but it's on the firmer side. The back actually the shock absorbers have a piggyback canister that also has a protective cover over the canister so it doesn't leak or get cracked because it protrudes out. So the shock absorbers are more on the racy side. And the air springs smooth out some of the undulations on bad pavement, but it's definitely more firm. If you're somebody that's looking for a boat, more of a softer ride, the RS6 is far superior than this.
Yes. All right, let's talk about the engine, Mark.
All right, let's do it.
So, Mark, what you have here is the M177. This is AMG's famous twin-turbo V8. It's in basically everything. This is a derivative of what we've seen in the AMG GTC. But this is a wet sump, where that, I believe, is a dry sump. It produces 603 horsepower, 617 foot-pounds of torque. It's got cylinder deactivation, 2 turbos, active engine mounts, and as you're about to tell me, I'm sure this looks like a lot of fun to work on.
I would love to bring this to a Meineke, and I'd like to have them do some quick plugs, do a couple, swap in some new turbos. Look at the packaging on this thing.
Be like, nah, I'm done. Here's the other thing. It's attached to a 9-speed MCT. So that is Mercedes developed 9-speed. They call it an automatic. However, it does not have a torque converter. It's got a wet clutch. If you want to slide this thing around, which I'm not saying you should for legal reasons, you have to be in 3rd gear, because once you hit the rev limiter, the slide ends. I think it's time for us to head to Autobahn Country Club.
Oh boy, I can't wait. I assume you're going to be driving?
Oh, we'll see, Mark.
All right, good day. Jack, we're at Autobahn Country Club, our home base, where we can exploit some of the cars like this AMG. And just so everybody's aware, I had to suffer through Jack showing me silverback gorillas pounding their chest at little children before this, so I know I'm in a real treat, in for a real treat.
I don't know what you're talking about, Mark. Launch control.
Oh my God. Oh my God, dude, this thing is nuts.
We're not even in drift mode, Mark.
Oh my God, this thing is gorilla fest.
Well, Mark, if you want a wagon that's also a supercar.
Yeah, why not?
And Mark, don't forget too, you can also put this into drift mode if you're
drift mode, what's that?
Mark, it's it's a little something that I like to do. Well, why not, right? I mean, if you have an E63 wagon when you're in Rome, Mark.
Yeah, I got the seat massager. This is full-blown monkey machine. So if you've ever wondered why people would go out and spend $115,000 or $130,000, now you know why.
This thing, if you drive it like I just did, and you go full banana mode, full silverback gorilla, it is worth all of the $142,000.
That's what this is?
Yep.
Oh, I thought you said it was like 115.
Well, poverty spec.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
okay.
Poverty spec. None of the carbon bits, not the carbon ceramic brakes. This is 142. Moment of seriousness as we actually describe what this thing is like and how it
gives a
compares.
shit?
It's my job, Mark.
Oh,
I'm an astute professional.
You're a sophisticated AMG driver?
Yes. So, Mark, in this segment, you have the RS6, E63 AMG S, and the M5. The M5 isn't a wagon, but it's still in this super sedan segment. We just had the RS6. How does this compare to that car?
I'll be really honest. The RS6 is a way better street car. It's more refined, it's more comfortable, it's insanely fast, while it doesn't have as much character as this. If you're someone that has a bunch of sports cars or you race, and you just want that really amazing street car, the RS6 looks better, it's just feels way better put together. But if you don't have that, and you want your daily driver to be a maniac, the transmission is more responsive, the engine feels like it has more life, but everything on the inside is like, what the hell is happening, which we talked about already.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a broken record of Mercedes. There's a huge wow presence to the cabin, but it doesn't work correctly. The motor has a lot of character. The gearbox, when it's working, unlike the AMG GTC we did, is just, it is so sharp. It's not quite as good as a PDK or something along those lines, but it's very, very sharp and gives this car character.
It has the 25% that the RS6 didn't have that I complained about. That's what this has. But what this adds to it as well is a bunch of gimmicks. It's a very here and now car. It's a car that you're gonna lease and probably get tired of. And I don't think it rides nearly as well as the RS6 when you're really driving it on the street, when you're driving it like you probably will. You can just have more fun with this. Not to say that it's any faster, probably in a straight line or whatever, but I enjoy driving this more, but I would rather own the RS6.
This has a lot more sharpness. It's doing its best. Again, this is a very heavy car, as we talked about in the shop, emulating a sports car.
Yes.
So if you don't have a sports car and you want your daily driver to do what I just did earlier, crazy drifts,
yes,
this is what you buy.
The RS6 does not do that. And you think about when you're driving, like all these electronic systems, the rear wheel steering, everything feels like it's doing everything for you. This has more of that muscle car feel where you can get the ass end to swing out. It makes a bunch of noise. It just feels more juvenile, and I guess that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, I really think, Mark, if you are in the market for something like this, again, much like we talked about in the recent 911 Turbo S that we just did, if you have the money, and this is something you want to buy, I can't imagine if you actually did spend the money on this that you would be disappointed. This thing's incredible.
You're not going to be disappointed in this. No matter what you choose, like between the wagons and the M5 we talked about, I would rather have this RS6 over the M5. They both have way more character and... Dude, I know that would never get old for you.
No, not ever. So with that, Mark, let's head into the final thoughts.
All right. Final thoughts on the E63 AMG Wagon. I never understood the rabid following behind these things, and I'd never driven this before. So I kind of get it and somewhat don't. The whole point of this is you have a supercar engine and transmission and all-wheel drive system and all the things in a family hauler. That's essentially what this is. It performs on a track and will keep up with high performance machines, like really high-end high performance machines. On the street, you can put babies, dogs, pets, parakeets, gerbils, or your lovers in here. You can go to the grocery store and nobody would ever know what you're driving. It's so under the radar, of course, not with this paint job. The big issue is it's prohibitively expensive. It's for the person that has disposable income and does not want a typical family hauler. You can go sideways in it, and you can go in the snow, adverse climates. It's a super safe feeling vehicle, and that's what it does. It does the dual personality thing better than most anything on the road. Now, it's not as refined as the RS6 and some of the other luxury products, and it's not trying to be. It's that alternative to that executive feeling wagon or estate or whatever you want to call super sedan. I like the fact that it has personality. This is why you would choose it. But most people would never know what you're driving, and that's the true highlight of it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.